comment about our speakers if you haven't already done so. Our next speaker is Toastmaster Jeff Rufinoff. Jeff is working from the Speeches by Management Manual, project number 4, the status report. His objective is to organize and prepare a status report involving the overall condition or plan of a plan or program, or the performance of a department or a company in relation to its goals. Today, Jeff will be reporting on the status of the Jeff Rufinoff story. Please welcome Jeff in his speech, Taking on Water.
Head table, Toastmasters and guests. I'm excited to bring you an update on the Jeff Rufinoff story. As I've been working closely with Jeff for over 4 decades, I consider myself an expert in my field. My hope today is that I share this status update with you. You may reflect on the status of your own story. Let's consider the Jeff Rufinoff story as the story of a ship at sea. Certainly a seaworthy vessel at first, the JRS had charted a course that was straight and true. Eagle Scout, National Honor Society, varsity letter winner, 9th in his high school class of 600, West Point graduate, 10 platoon leader in Desert Shield and Desert Storm, a commander of over 240 soldiers in the Republic of Korea, a bookstore owner, franchise owner, and director of a nonprofit that reached thousands of people. The JRS seemed to be on the course to be ended. But below deck, the JRS was taking on water. It all started with a glimpse of pornography 11 years after setting sail. The result was a small crack that allowed the smallest amount of seawater to seep into the boat. Over time, however, as viewing pornography grew into an avaricious habit and then into an addiction, the hole in the ship grew. The ship seemed to be on course, however, especially when all others around him appeared to be sailing in the same direction. 12 years later, though, Jeff realized that the hole inside was growing and his vessel was taking on water at an alarming rate. He feverishly sought help trying to plug this hole. His Baptist girlfriend at the time suggested they see their pastor, and he agreed. The pastor suggested plugging the hole with church attendance, prayer, fasting, Bible reading, scripture memorization, and a rededication of his life to Christ. Jeff was frightened by this hole, so he was willing to try. I'm unable to make sense of what happened next, but all I can report to you is this. As soon as he would plug the hole, he would turn around and unplug that very hole. It could be minutes, hours, or a couple of days, but invariably the pattern was the same for the JRS. Plugging the hole, unplugging the hole, taking on water. This went on for years. Jeff tried more ways to plug the hole. Relationships didn't work. Neither did money, occupation, status, or financial security. Regardless of where he traveled in the world, that hole wouldn't stay plugged. Weekend workshops, men's accountability groups, cassette tapes, CDs, DVDs, books, telephone and in-person counseling, even a 30-day stint in a rehab facility. Jeff tried every plug he could think of, but the JRS was still taking on water. By this point, Jeff was living below deck, fixated on the hole. He began to lose track of his course and didn't know that his rudder had broken off long ago, or that his sails were in tatters. Now and then he would peek up from below, but he was intimidated by all the other vessels that seemed so much faster, sleeker, and better equipped than his. He didn't feel worthy to sail alongside them anyway, so he felt safer just staying below. Occasionally, he would hear someone radio him from a nearby vessel, but he was too afraid they were going to tell him about the hole in his boat or all the rotten wood within, as if they could somehow see inside his boat. So eventually, he just turned his radio off. Finally, during a particularly stormy day at sea, Jeff tried to sink his own ship. Thankfully, someone was on board the ship to stop him, but they couldn't stop the storm in his heart. adrift at sea, Jeff prayed to God every night for years for his ship to sink. The exact prayer went like this: God, please don't let me wake up in the morning. But if you do, please let me recover from this so I can be a voice of hope to those who are still struggling. During this time, with some help from a friendly tugboat, the JRS was towed back to port, back to the shipyard where the shipbuilders still lived, Port Orlando. The JRS went into dry dock in 2004 and began a lengthy repair process. Like all ships, the JRS was not meant to stay in dry dock, so it tried a few short test voyages, never drifting too far from the port and always with the tugboat on hand, lest problems with rudder or sail manifest again. Unfortunately, internal problems surfaced quickly, and the JRS was taking on water again. By now, the JRS had nearly exhausted all sources of funding. The JRS had spent 31 of its 42 years lost at sea, struggling to maintain an outer image of seaworthiness while rotting from the inside out. In the summer of 2010, the JRS had reached a decision point. It was sink or sail, and the JRS would sail. To effectively do this, Jeff would have to retake his rightful place on deck. As he did, he found there were others who had sailed these ships before him, these seas before him, and they were willing to offer their hope to him. These ships were large, small, fancy, plain, new and old, but they all had one thing in common. The ship's captains had been in the same hopeless place as Jeff, yet they now seemed to have a peace and serenity about them, and they were willing to share their stories with Jeff. Over time, he began to reset his rudder and repair the sails. As he became less fearful, Jeff turned on the ship's radio again and began answering calls. For the first time in years, soon he began radioing other ship captains as well. As the JRS continued out to sea, there were stormy days and there were sunny days. But Jeff realized that neither of these stayed around for too long. The waves might be high today, the seas could be flat tomorrow. But the JRS was not being knocked off course anymore. For the first time in his life, Jeff wasn't sailing alone. He wasn't hiding inside the ship, and the JRS wasn't taking on water. He was on deck. He was basking in the sunshine. He was marveling in the wonder of the tides and waves and oceans. And as he began to get calls on the radio from those who sounded as broken as he once was, he realized God had answered his prayers that he had prayed all those years ago. Please let me recover from this so I can be a voice of hope to those who are still struggling.